So this came, as a surprise to some of us. We were saying it was Kikwete joining the Obamas, Kikwete, president of Tanzania, then joining the Obamas and other leaders of the world to try and get the open government partnership in place. And then all of a sudden, 2017, Tanzania withdraws from it. So these were some of the initial signs that we were going to be heading to darkness. But then, in no time, we've seen that before 2017, just 3 years before, in 2014, Tanzania's constitutional process stalled. In fact, Kenya had gone ahead of us. 2010, you redid your constitution. And some of us in the region have actually praised Kenya for having started a good journey. I mean, some of us were saying we should be following Kenya's footsteps in terms of having managed, in a bumpy road, though, we know, but having managed to redo your constitution. And I stand to be corrected, but I will say, and I want to argue, even with my colleagues from Kenya, Kenya's constitution stands to be the best in the region as we speak today. Of course, there are implementation challenges. You'd expect that. But the text of the constitution is great. I know that you guys are discussing points on whether you of the charter, but that notwithstanding, your constitution is great. And then Tanzania comes next. We restarted our constitutional process in 2010, just as you finished yours. And then 2, 3, 4 years down the line, politicians differ, civil society is overpowered, and the process stalls to date. In fact, we are just hearing now promises, which is not the first time they are doing. The ruling party says it will be up until, the 2025 elections that we are likely to be going back to the constitutional process. The third point, which is an indication of regression, is this point of refusal by Tanzania to actually adopt and ratify the African Charter on elections, governance, and the African Charter on democracy, elections, and governance. Now, this itself is an indication that Tanzania is not likely to be, moving forward with respect for the freedoms that are required to be, abided by during elections. And this year, we stand, to watch this. We are witnessing a lot of disrespect of rights of candidates, of parties, of voters, of everyone in the process. So how I wish Tanzania had signed up to and had ratified the African Charter on democracy in elections, because then we will be standing around to say, no, you cannot be doing this. But there's been, resistance, even refusal for Tanzania to be able to pursue the ratification of the African Charter. My final point in terms of these initial points is a point on Tanzania withdrawing, just recent years. Tanzania withdrew, her membership to the African Charter in terms of the individuals being able to pursue cases. Okay, so individuals today, Tanzanians today, cannot be taking cases to the African Charter on human and people's rights. So to the African Court. So I think based on these 4 or 5 points, at minimum, I would like to say it's on a disappointing point that Tanzania is fast regressing from the practice of freedoms, democracy, and even socialism that we used to see in the past. Because I must tell you guys, socialism is not all that bad. Socialism is about, humanity. We've had leaders in this country that lived a socialist life, that was the opposite of what is happening today, a life of self-enrichment that we are seeing now. People are eating, people are getting hefty scales of salaries and allowances and payments and so on. The only job that you want to be doing now for yourself to be rich is politics. If you wanted to become rich now, you have to be getting into politics. You have to run for membership in parliament. You have to be running for membership in the Zanzibar House of Representatives. You have to be running for membership in the local government councils, because that way you'll become rich. And I want to say with confidence that a country that depends on politics enrichment shall not see development. And this practice itself stands in contravention with the treaty establishing the EAC. Article 7 of the EAC treaty is very clear. It says that the EAC shall be people-centered and market-driven. So if the private sector is starved and only the politicians have been fed, full, you're not saying we will be seeing the full enforcement and implementation of the treaty. So these are my points, but I want to, come to my second bit and then I will conclude. So now, based on what I said, I think there are problems that we must sort out as civil society in the region. Number one, I think we are not collaborating enough. We are not networking enough either. I've seen a colleague here joining from EAC. I saw also, I've been to Kampala and I've worked with colleagues in Kapalagala, the Uganda NGO Forum, for instance. We used to do it so much together in the past. We would meet and discuss. I know that the donor landscape, the financing landscape is also shrinking, but I think we must be able to devise mechanisms. And Achieng, you correctly asked, how, what should we be doing in terms of, for instance, the regional mechanisms? But I want to expand. We should not be just waiting for the regional mechanisms. The EAC is a customs union. We are a common market. Movement of people, movement of labor, movement of goods should be free by now. I think, and you will correct me if I'm wrong, I think we are not doing enough of networking, of collaboration at the time when the governments are so much collaborating in terms of doing the negatives. I want to thank EAC. They are really doing their best. Every time there's been a problem at the EAC, every time there's been a problem with some NGO in Uganda or Kenya or Tanzania, I must say EAC is really trying. And see, this morning, we are meeting, they've actually been the cause that we are meeting to be able to at least discuss the plight of this region. So number one, I think the civil society in the region must be standing together more, so much so that we can be in defense of democracy in this region. Democracy is actually in the waning. It's actually degenerating. Where is democracy? Would you say Rwanda is democratic? Would you say Tanzania is democratic? Would you say Uganda is democratic? Would you say Kenya? I mean, we've seen the GNZs are trying, to put the Kenyan leadership at task. But still, I wish we could do more. Because my take on the GNZs and how it's happening in Kenya is that if we give these movements uncontrolled and unregulated, uncoordinated, we stand the risk of going to darkness. And I think we must step up and be able to manage, guide, moderate, like Acheng you're doing now. You're moderating. If you did not moderate, some of us could speak for 7 hours. But since you're there to moderate, then you can tell us, hey, you must be wrapping up now. I'm not asking you to tell me to wrap up. Of course, I'm already wrapping up. I'm already wrapping up. So my final point is that, where we are now is we are at a point of serious attacks on the freedom of expression, freedom of movement. Imagine Agatha and Boniface Mwangi were being told here, the mistakes, the crime they did was to not disclose the actual reason of their entry into Dar es Salaam. And just imagine their entry, the reason of their entry, the real reason was to come and, join hands with colleagues to be able to attend a court case that is facing Honorable Timbuliso. Where is the crime in there? Where is the crime? So to say that you produced false information was just an excuse. And even there, how could you be doing what was done to an East African colleague, an East African citizen? Are we heading towards a political federation in East Africa? If these are the tendencies we are seeing, I don't think so. And I end here. I'm going to be picking questions when time comes. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Advocate Kiama, for your thought-provoking comments. Just as I was listening to you, I remember there was a time I met someone from Portugal, and they were explaining to me that they actually most of them don't know who the name of their president, because the president is not popular. He's doing his job. They'll know like superstars, they'll know athletes and other famous people, but they won't know most of their politicians. And I think that is because of the point that you mentioned, that politics is not a form of enrichment in the country. Politics is a service. And I do agree with you that if politics is the form of enrichment, then, a country will not see development, because people just see politics as an opportunity to eat their turn. And I'm just wondering, how we counter not just the narrative and the culture of politics as the only path to enrichment, but also how do we expand access to economic gain and economic profitability beyond just politics? Because it's true for Tanzania, it's true for Kenya, that at the moment, the quickest way to become rich is to become a politician. How do we separate economics from politics, separate political power from economic power? To bring, in my opinion, that would help with the challenges that we have, particularly around democratic governance. Again, both Grace and Herbert called for strengthening or having greater judicial enforcement at regional and continental levels. And you also made mention of this in terms of the African Court on Human and People's Rights. And this is, I guess, a question more for everyone to think through as you come back. Do we think that the judicial bodies, both the regional, the EACJ, the African Court and the African Court, are avenues for dealing with some of these challenges that we have, or do they go beyond a judicial mandate? And forgive me, I like to tell stories, but I'll tell one last quick one. I studied my law in India, and one of the things that was written on our university wall was that no matter how good a constitution is, if those who are called to work it are bad, it will be a bad constitution. And no matter how bad a constitution is, if those who are called to work it are good, it will be a good constitution. And I found that to be true over the years, that no matter how many laws and policies we have, at the end of the day, it seems that citizen engagement with those laws and policies and the institutions that enforce them is what determines whether we have good laws or bad laws, and not actually the letter of the law. And I look forward to hearing your comment back on that when we come back to you. We have taken more time than I anticipated that we will take, but I will request your indulgence. We will take your questions. Grace, yes, we will be sharing the recommendations. And yes, your comments are very apt on the group in terms of, you know, it being very sad that we are seeing issues multiplying themselves across borders, and that the dream of regional integration, which was to have justice and economic and social development across regions, is not what happen is not what is happening. Instead, we are seeing the opposite. And with that, I would like to call on Mr. Mohammed Ali. Mr. Mohammed Ali works with SONSA Somalia, and will be speaking to us, will be contributing to the topic that's already being discussed in terms of civic and economic freedoms within the region. Mr. Ali, please, you have the floor. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Please, can you hear me?
Yes, I hear you.
Thank you very much again, and thank you, ECOSOC, for hosting this discussion of regional webinar themed reclaiming civic and economic freedom in East Africa and the implementation, the cross-border trade and justice and regional integration. So I wanted to highlight firstly, how about civic and economic freedom in East Africa generally? As you are aware, civic economic freedom are essential pillars of democratization process and progressive society in every nation. Civic freedom is a part of human rights that allows individuals to participate freely in the political and economic and social to their communities. The main important thing to address is how is the freedom of expression in East Africa countries. In Kenya, I think in Kenya is more or less better in terms of freedom of expression. If you look Tanzania, somehow there is a challenge. If you look Uganda, there is a more challenge. If you look other East African countries, somehow is very restricted, and the freedom of expression is the right to speak and publish ideas without fear, punishment based of people's constitutions. As well as freedom of association is very important in the region, because the NGOs, political parties, community organizations, they are right to lobby, they are right to conduct freedom of associations. And this is a right to the public and the right to the gathering publicity or the private, including protests, meetings, and cultural events. If you look right to participate in governance, somehow is a very difficult and very challenge in East Africa community countries, community nations. When we look to economic freedom, the world progressed because economic is a very important for the every nation. The economic depends how it is that freedom to trade. The economic depends on how to access to the market and finance, as well as economic related to how regulatory fairness in terms of laws and institutions that support fair competition and protect against corruption and monopolies. Both of it, economic freedom and civic promotes innovation, entrepreneurship, investment, and poverty reduction. When we look East Africa nations, how much the rate of poverty, how much the rate of unemployment, because the result of there is limitation of economic freedom as well as freedom of engagement. If you look, both of them interact without civic freedom. It is difficult to demand fair economic policies and hold corruption officials accountable. Without economic freedom, the civic participation may be limited by poverty, inequality, or economic dependency on the state. In East Africa, if you look, both of it, it is a very challenging to how this big influences in terms of justice, in terms of cross-border, in terms of integration. Today, the East Africa nations, according to the civic space, for example, Somalia and East Africa remains classified as represent, reflecting ongoing challenge. When you look for the journalists, when you look at the civil society organizations, they are feeling a huge barriers to engage these issues. Without civic space, without freedom of speak, it become to lose accountability and transparency purpose, both economic and civic issues. When you look at the cross-border, when you look at the trade, formal trade, especially livestock and food and domestic products, is vital to border communities, and it is valued to hundreds of millions annually, although much remains unreported. Women and youth, many of these countries involves this activity, but often they face unregulated charges, intimidation, and a lack of legal protection of their trade. In terms of regional cross-border, the fairer borders roll out East Africa Community simplified the cross-border. When you look at the status, still there is challenge in terms of cross-border products or to get freedom of economic, of freedom of business. When you look at the transparent system in East Africa, it is very difficult to align or to mention that is transparent system in the place. That's the one challenge. That's the second challenge. That's third challenge. Therefore, we are recommending that East Africa member state to enact public benefit organizations bill and establish advisory councils at the cross-border issues, cross-border economic issues, cross-border trade, free movement. So that's the main important that will reset the progressive of East Africa communities. There is East Africa Council of Ministers, yes, they agree on basic civil rights protection and allocate border facilitation regulations free movement to remove barriers of trade. But the implementation is a challenge. So that's now the status of the East Africa. What we need both civic rights and economic opportunities together. When one strives, the other one will be high, and it will be community and the member states. With clear rules, transparent process, and local engagement is very important to achieve cross-border trade or cross-border business that can grow into reliable gateways for opportunity in East Africa. So ECOSOC and the civil society organizations and the other stakeholders, they must bring this vision together to live stream and to discuss decision makers to facilitate and to implement the agreed points in East Africa policies and frameworks. The question is, both of it, how positively affects the cross-border trade and civic and economic freedom. Positively, it makes efficiency trade facilitation between among East Africa communities, as well as a business associations and trade should be in our fair trade policies and business movement, which East Africa trade will be progress.
Mr. Ali, could you conclude your remarks, please?
Yes, 2 minutes, I think I can conclude. In terms of justice, freedom of economic, it needs supports. It needs independent judiciary system that can support to feel business groups and business traders to have a justice in case face challenges. I need to final my comment. Regional integration, it needs both civic freedom and economic freedom. Both of it encourages the progress of a member state in terms of both of it. For example, civic freedom encourages dialogue and consultations with the citizens on integration treaties and reform which build ownership and legitimacy. So I wanted to finalize this point that I mentioned now. So thank you, over to you.
Thank you so very much, Mr. Ali. I do agree with you that you need both. You need both civic rights and you need economic development as well. One cannot work without the other. As having done this human rights work for a long time, I've often been told that you can't eat rights. And it's true. Many times, you know, you want people to make the right choices, but people are hungry. And you know, it's just a fact that, you know, people can't eat rights. You can go to a place and talk to people until you're blue in the face about rights, but if they don't have basic needs, your preaching will not be heard very clearly. I am now in danger of unconstitutionally extending my term limit here. So I want to go to Mr. Edmund Yakali. I welcome you to the floor. I encourage you all to please keep posting your questions, your comments in the chat. I'm keeping track. And oh yes, I had one question for you, Mr. Ali. In terms of being one of the newer countries on the block, do you feel like we're really harnessing the dividends of regional integration? How has joining the EAC benefited, if at all, is there any impact on the ground? Maybe you can respond to it when you come back for your next remarks. Mr. Yakani, please do take the floor. You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. I have just, if I can seek a 10 minutes just break. I have something I'm attending to, just 10 minutes. Is it allowed, or if somebody can take over and come after? Is George around?
Okay, sure. What I can do is I can come back to the panelists.
Yes.
And they can speak, and then when you come, we'll see where we can fit you in. Thank you so much. So before I go to the panelists, we had requests to speak. Lillian, you had made a request to speak. Do you want to take the floor?
Yes, Maureen, thank you. Thank you very much. And thank you for moderating this very significant panel. And thank you to the panel speakers. This has been quite insightful, and I've gotten a glimpse of a number of issues that have been very interesting to hear addressed. And thanks to the participants as well who have joined us today. And we really are grateful for your time and your attendance. So my questions probably go to the panelists, and it can, one can be, I mean, some will be directed to specific, and then one will just be a general one. One, Herbert, from the presentation, presenter gave us the trade practices across the region. I just wanted to, when he comes back, when he's actually giving his remarks and responding to the questions, could you also give us a highlight that is with the current trends in the region, that is from the presentations we've had from Ms. Grace Wangeshi, from the presentations we've had from Mr. Deus Kibamba, having Somalia as the new coming partner state. I just wanted to hear from him what are his comments in regards to the current trends vis-a-vis the trade, that is the cross-border trade in the East Africa. Do these, how can I put it, civil unrest within partner states hinder any cross-border trade practices? What we are seeing in Kenya, is it likely to hinder I mean, we all know that Kenya is the super capitalist nation in the region. And so with the ongoing riots, is this likely to hinder the trade practices across the region? And if this is so, what can be the recommendations moving forward? Now, for all the panelists, my question also lies to asking for their recommendations. I know we're having this as a regional conversation, and as it stands currently, the EAC as the regional bloc itself is also facing a number of challenges. Being very strong is the financial challenge. And I remember one of the comments that came from the panelist speakers was around activating the East African Court of Justice. That has not been quite a practice over time due to, again, the challenges that we're facing with financial contributions from the partner states. But as we are speaking currently, we are having the EALA session on the budget. I think they've just concluded that last week. And as we're speaking, they're actually having their sessions virtually. Again, this is also due to the challenges of not being able to finance their presence in Arusha. So my question is, what then is the way forward? If we have seen from what Ms. Wangeshi highlighted, the challenges across all, most of the East African partner states, those are within the East African partner states. But then at the regional level, how do we address this as civil society? How do we move? We're speaking of solidarity. How can we move? And we are still being faced by the same challenge also as civil society, given the current circumstances of the funding cuts. That is the global challenge currently. So then again, I just wanted to highlight that to also stir up some of the conversations and recommendations that the panelists can address. Thank you, Maureen.
Thank you so much. So for now, Grace Dorong, I don't know if you are still with us and able to take the floor. You had put in a question in the chat. I thought maybe you could ask the question. Grace Dorong, are you still with us? Okay, if you're not with us, then I see that Tusingwire Yasin, you have also asked a very long question. Would you like to take the floor, please, and ask your question out loud?
Hello.
Yes, please, go ahead.
Greetings from DRC. I'm Yacine Tsingwire. I'm the Executive Director of Action pour les droits solidaires, or Action for Solidarity Rights. I'm a new member of EACSOF. It's been really a very huge pleasure for us to join the community. We've been really, wondering what happens to us. And I think, as I mentioned in my comment, we relate with actually all the speakers. The voices raised here by all the panelists, they are actually speaking our voice. We hear them and we relate with what they say. Congo has almost been ignored or maybe excluded in so many things. We live on our own. I will not complain to you, but I really feel like it's a shared experience from what I had. I also follow what happens in the East African community, other member countries. But I think our case has been extremely complex, but also, ignored. The space for civic participation, civic engagement is almost non-existent. Nobody cares, and I think, as I mentioned in my comment, this is incentive as why we apply to join the EACSOF. We have attempted to join many other member coalitions, and I think we are moving forward. The reason is that we felt like we, especially in the Eastern DRC, we are not only actually excluded from the national level, we are definitely excluded from the regional level frameworks. Now, looking at what other presenters mentioned, if you look at maybe from the presentation of Herbert Cafero, you look at the presentation of Grace, you look at, of course, the presentation of Yakani, clearly Congo is completely unaware of what is happening, especially in beat the citizens, beat the leadership, beat civil society organizations. I think maybe we need to build a new momentum of engaging different actors, different civil society organizations, building coalitions, working together to make sure that people, power holders, duty bearers must understand that we have a new momentum of engaging with them, because I think this is the whole issue. They don't see us, we don't appear, and they don't care. They do what they do, and nobody's questioning what they are doing. There is no bigger voice, there is no sound. So I think for Eastern DRC, we will need really to appeal, and I will be coming back to you individually or collectively with specific requests. We have been documenting violations. We have not seen, a lot of work going on regarding the East African community, maybe in the eastern region, in the eastern part of the Congo. We have not really been even somehow integrated in what is happening. So I think for us, we need for now to claim our role. We need to participate actively. We need to engage with the forum, the coalition, the EACSOF. We really need to give us space.
I'm so sorry. Could you tie up your question, please? I'm so sorry, but we're sort of out of time. If you could shorten your question, please.
I think I'm done. I'm done,
so
because
sorry.
what I wanted really to raise here is that give us some space, give us the opportunity. Of course, with others, let's come with our inputs, let's come with our shared views. Please give us that kind of leverage so that we are able to influence. This is what we are asking now. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you
again.
so much. I will let thank you. I will let either Lillian or Mr. Yakani respond to that when later on as we close the session. For now, I'd like to ask Grace, are you back? Are you able to take the floor?
Yes, sure. I'm here, Jen. Thank you.
Please do just take just 1 minute to ask your question, please.
Less than a minute, actually. Thank you. My name is Grace. Just a follow-up to Mr. Kibamba's presentation. I feel that he touched on a very key issues, but basically we understand this the space that we have currently. You can see that the shrinking space is silencing a lot of voices across. You can realize, like for us in South Sudan, our Papa, Mr. Edmond Yakani, is on that space, and you see that he gets very little support, especially from CSO networks across in the country, and just because of what has been mentioned here. And so I feel that as East Africa body, you have an upper hand to help in empowering these voices more, to try to create with the recommendations from these discussions to come up with a way forward on how the network can better support in bringing up these shrinking voices. We understand that it's not an easy task at the moment, but I believe that if the unified energy can be put on board, and I believe this can come out clear. So my question was, what is it? What is the recommendation forward? What can be done from now on to try to strengthen this further, to fight this kind of a shrinking space? I know it is now the politics versus the civil society, and also that the civil society is standing as a bridge between the community and the government. So when the civil society space is quiet, then the community is being let down. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Grace. Panelists, you have had the questions. We have 2 more questions. Unfortunately, because of time, I will not allow the answers. I'll just read the questioners or the people putting forth the questions to speak. I will just read out the questions. Daniel Lema says, given all the frustrations we have had, $1 million question for me would be to any panelist. What do they think is the primary problem that is confronting EAC and partner states at the moment, leading to all the challenges we have heard? Oh, that's a double-barreled question, Daniel, but thank you for asking it because I think it's the fundamental basis. What is the problem that we're trying to solve? Why is the regional system not working in the way that it has been designed and built and, put money into? Why is it not functioning in the way that was envisaged by the treaty? Baba Africa says many thanks to the panelists for very informative insights. Looking at the civic space and the state of human rights in the region, how do we address the shrinking funding space especially towards human rights and governance? There are robust frameworks in the region, like the CDF, but largely depend on donor support. Since 2015, there has been a kind of withdrawal of donor support and CSOs engaged in human rights, democracy, and governance. NB, I agree that we are not collaborating enough. However, effective collaboration also requires resources. So I'll call my panel back to respond to all your very loaded, if I might use that word, questions and comments. And I invite the panelists. You don't have to take all the questions. You can just pick 1 or 2 of the questions from the ones that you've heard and give your expert opinion around it. I'm happy. I don't know if Edmund, you are now ready to take the floor. Then we can start with you and work our way back through the rest of the panel.
Yeah, thank you very much. I think I will take the floor because of time. I don't want to take it long. And I would like to really dive into what is next question. I'm quite sure we share the same analysis with the colleagues, and I subscribe to all the analysis being in the economic or the civic space side. And as the capacity of a chair of EAC, I think for me is that we need to start diving into the following follow-up. One, we need to start working on documentation of these incidences and produce our own East African civil society reports based on the topic of this webinar, and we use it for increasing dialogue between us and the member states' leaderships at a member states country level and even at a regional level. So for me, that's really very important because whether we like it or don't like it, the region almost share the same pattern in terms of violations, in terms of shrinking civic space. But as EAC, we take the responsibility of rolling out that. So for me, that's really something that I'd like to bring forward, that as a way forward they can take it then. We have seen also the threats that are coming, other colleagues have raising towards economic. I think economic freedoms is something that we need to take it from the angle of the civil society very serious, because UAE, China, all of them are coming to the region, and the region is now under attack of external actors that want to use our region for generating economical benefit that does not benefit our common citizens directly, but benefit them as multinational companies. I think this is an area that also we take it up. I think publication of reports around economic freedoms, around civic freedoms is very important in the region, that I would like to dive into that. I would like to say we are very appreciative of this particular webinar. And of course, this webinar have given us a trend. We can see almost elections is coming at a sequence that Uganda, South Sudan, and then we have Kenya, and almost the region is going to be becoming volatile because of electoral dispute that our political leaders have. So as a civil society, we need to undertake that responsibility of preventing electoral-related violence. And I think we need to come really a big debate that we take it up. And even if it's possible, we need to have a convening on how to prevent electoral violence at the moment that we're in now. So I think for me, that's what I'd like to take it up, and I don't want to drag time. I'm interested that out of this webinar, we should come out with a summary of report, and we should build up a very concrete report, evidence-based, that we can use it for advocacy and lobby. I don't repeat what my colleagues have said. Almost I shared everything with them, and that rendered me not to consume time, but to focus on this message that we need to act now, not tomorrow. And we need to amplify our voice loudly to the attention of our leaders. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Yakani. That was very succinct and a good, summary of all the issues that we have been discussing, and some concrete way forward. Please, Mr. Mohammed Ali, would you like to take the floor? Mr. Ali, are you still with us? Do you want to take the floor to make some additional comments? Okay. Advocate Deuce Kibamba, would you like to take the floor?
Yes, please. Thank you. I must say I'm quite impressed with the comments that came from a few people, but the comments are quite representative. I just wanted to pick on one or two. Brother from Eastern Congo, I stand with you. I sympathize with the newcomers in the region. But I want to give you a comforting message. I believe we stand almost on the same page. We can't say, the ERICAMers are collaborating enough. I mean, the ERICAMers are Tanzania, Kenya, Uganda. But even with Rwanda and Burundi that came next almost immediately, the collaboration has not been good enough. Now, picking from the question that came on, us not collaborating enough in view of, the resources. Yes, I agree. I think the question here is financial, the dwindling of donor funding, for instance. That I agree, but I think we should keep trying more. Let me tell you one point. The donor landscape itself today is much more ready to fund collaborative initiatives more than individual country initiatives. So my take would be, my appeal is that let's collaborate more. Using the EAC as a platform, but even more, the minimum we can be doing is to be sharing information. Can I tell you, colleagues from Uganda, that we've been struggling here to push for a representative system, political system, before elections, akin to what you have, colleagues. And then people here don't understand anything about your system. The fact that you have groups represented in parliament, for instance, the youth, the women, PWDs, of course, for you, a special representation by the army, UPDF. But this itself, this information itself, is something of novelty to Tanzanians. So I guess we should be, let's not wait for collaboration that is dependent on donor funding. Let's start sharing information on WhatsApps, on webinars like this, and so on and so on. And I must admit, I'm very impressed with the turn up this morning. I mean, 50 people is something big to be speaking together from across the region. From DR Congo, from Kinshasa to Somalia, to Mogadishu. This one is quite impressive, and I think we could do more regular webinars, so much so that we can be speaking to each other more. Finally, on the point of documentation, I totally agree with the EAC chair. We should start doing regular documentation of these incidences. Every time there's an incident, let it be documented, so that we can decide which one to make a statement about, which one we need to investigate even more, and then we produce regular reports, say annual reports on regional incidences that are happening. At this point, I want to thank you all, and thanks for having me here. I am very, very much honored. Thanks.
Thank you, Advocate Kibamba. We have Yasin to Singwire also has posted another comment to we need to maximize engagement with existing frameworks at all levels, regional, continental, international, either through advocacy, lobbying, or even strategic litigation. Ms. Grace Wangeshi, do you have any additional comments to make? Ms. Wangeshi, are you with us?
Sorry, Maureen, Ms. Wangeshi stepped out. She had to go to another meeting.
All right. Mr. Herbert, you started us off. Do you have additional comments to make?
Yes, thank you so much. You asked me a question at the beginning, and also I think I got two other questions to respond to. But just a bit briefly, there is a question that you asked around whether the current challenges, economic challenges that we are facing, are attributed to the colonial legacies. And of course, also linking it to the African Union theme of reparations. I think I would like to emphasize first that colonial legacies matter deeply to the economic struggles we are facing as the EAC states, especially countries like Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Burundi, and DRC. And during the pre-colonial period, across all EAC, nearly all EAC partner states, there were thriving sectors like pottery, salt, iron, smelting, backcloth, and gunsmithing. However, when the colonialists came, they systematically dismantled all the sectors. And the infrastructure that was built for extraction. That's why at Siatini we talk about extractivism. Extractivism is on the rise. When you look at communities, host communities for different, especially extractive projects, you'll find that communities are decrying the negative externalities of these investment projects. Talk about stone quarrying, mining, name it. There are challenges in those communities. But also the transport systems, such as the railway infrastructure, the roads, among others, all were developed to facilitate extraction of raw materials and transportation. There was nothing like helping, like the infrastructure system for the domestic, the local people. It was all about extraction. And look at the trade in primary commodities. That is linked to the colonial legacy because there was prioritization of cash crops, cash crop economy, and of course, when you look at the dependence on cash crop and commodities, it contributed to weak value chains. It also contributed to capital flight. That's why there is a lot of illicit financial flows, hemorrhage of resources from the continent, among other regional imbalances. But also, the cash crop economies are vulnerable to global market dynamics. For example, the issue of price volatility. Currently, the coffee sector is bearing the brunt, smallholder farmers are bearing the brunt of price volatility. The reason is because all that played out, the way we are integrated in the global economic system, that the price of coffee is, coffee is priced in US dollars, issues around exchange rates, issues around geopolitical risks, issues around shipping lines that as Africa, not just as the EAC, as Africa, we have a few shipping lines. And so even under the African Continental Free Trade Area, goods have to go out of the continent to come back to the continent. Kenya has to export goods through Singapore and then they go to Ghana. So that's all problematic. But also the issue of civil unrest that Lillian talked about. Civil unrest, be it political violence, insurgencies, or election-related protests, they directly disrupt free movement of goods, trade, and ultimately, of course, make the EAC unattractive to trade and investment. And that's why you cannot say you're attracting investors in the EAC if you have, for example, political instability. And for example, countries like DRC that have challenges, we've seen the president of DRC requesting for support from the US. In some parts of South Sudan where there is instability, which has made trade flows from Uganda unreliable, which then reduces cross-border export earnings. But also the civil unrest increases cost of doing business because traders then resort to alternative routes, which sometimes become very expensive, but also some undertake insurance, which increases the cost of doing business, among other challenges. But also it sort of delays regional integration infrastructure development because if there is all the instability, you cannot undertake regional infrastructure projects and development. But also these are NTBs, these are non-tariff barriers. And they have been increasing because of several reasons. And the political instability can be one of them. I remember there was a time when there was some political election-related instability in Kenya. We were not receiving fuel. I mean, the fuel trucks could not cross over. And so the cost of fuel went up. And there were challenges in that line. But also, Comrade Lema asked something around what can be done to make, is it the EAC work? What leaders need to do. I think it's to do with political will, having stronger political will. That we've dragged on policies, on so many things because of limited political will. And there is a lot of individualism. Every country is, making a stronger bargain for itself. I mean, if we are to talk about making the EAC regional integration work, I think we need to start thinking EAC even in terms of our national level engagements. We have to go beyond national level business. But also, the other issue is around regional value chains, thinking in terms of regional projects. Our president in Uganda usually talks about individual EAC partner states. he likens them to dwarfs. Indeed, single-handedly, like individual partner states can be dwarfs, but when we stand collectively, we become giants. Also, in view of the shifting global dynamics, we don't have a unified voice, which we need urgently, more than ever before. They're balkanizing us. I mean, Europe is balkanizing us. So it calls for the need to stand together more than ever before. Thank you so much. And of course, we can leverage trade, tax, and investment related policies to address all the challenges that we are facing, only if we have stronger political will. Thank you so much, distinguished participants, my fellow panelists, and everyone for listening.
Thank you so much, Herbert. I think we lost you there at the end, but you were saying thank you. Wangeshi, are you back? Do you want to take the floor? While we're waiting for the Wangeshi, Daniel Lema says, can EACSOF make it routine to hold these conversations every 2 weeks or else once in a month? We need this broad as well as specific targeted convos at the EAC. I hope, Lillian, you have taken note of that.
Okay, no, sorry, I couldn't unmute. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. You're
Achin.
back.
Yes.
Karibu.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I just couldn't unmute. I've been back for a while. So very quickly, let me address two questions. One is the question around funding. As I've said, we need to be strategic about how we fill in the funding gap. And the reality is that that boat has sailed. The funding landscape has completely changed and it's not likely to get any better. So what is it what do we do as East Africa bloc? The one thing I want to encourage is for us to start thinking of working together and seeking the available funds out there, but also about doing two critical things, seeking many more private-public engagements between ourselves and the private sector, but also encouraging East Africans to give more. If there's any lesson we can learn from the Gen Z movement in Kenya, is how they have been able to mobilize resources. As long as resources are needed for an important for activity or for use where it changes and transforms society, the young and Africans will always give. So we need to tap into that. We need to be able to demonstrate our results for people to give. So that is one of the untapped, areas of work that we need to get into. Civil society must learn to mobilize locally. The issue around what we should do around addressing these human rights violations, it's critical that again, and I had suggested that we come up with the civic space index, where we document. I think the issue of documentation has been emphasized even by the chair of EACSOF. We need to document more what is happening within this space, but leverage on that documentation. It's not just documentation, it's documentation for a purpose for advocacy with our government, a purpose in terms of getting regional, international support to address these ongoing cases and not to give up. So those are the two key things I would want to suggest, but also propose a stronger East African civil society engagement around the different thematic areas. So if it's the anti-torture cluster, let's work much more closely together. Let's know who's doing what. Let's assign responsibilities more based on our mandates. And I think that way we will begin to realize some benefits from the engagement. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wangeshi. This has been such a rich conversation. I just want to sort of just go back to the issue of funding that you mentioned, because this is something that is so close to my heart. We all know, for example, one, that we lose more to illicit financial flows than we receive in overseas development assistance. We know also that those who we used to see as our allies, they've shed all their lambskins and have declared their interests publicly. And their funding is now attached to requirements that do not necessarily match our human rights or governance values. We have been talking as a continent for the longest time, acknowledging the neo-colonial impact of our regional institutions, especially being externally funded. The AU has had a task force of one form or another on alternative financial flows for the last 20 or so years. And we're still, it's yet to manifest. How can we have a union, an African Union, and even our regional economic communities, which are supposed to be building blocks to this Pan-African Union? How can we have weak building blocks that are building into an institution which is purporting to become a global powerhouse and yet has 80 to 90% of its resources coming from external sources? It's not possible to meet the Pan-African dream of a continent led by its citizens and making its mark on the global scope if we can't even fund our own institutions. You can't go to our space and say, oh, get out of our countries, stop taking our minerals, stop buying out our forests, but please give us money to be able to do this, to get you out. It really doesn't make sense in terms of our continent and our work. I mean, we all know that saying about the person that pays the piper and all that, is the one that calls the tune, or however it goes. And you mentioned, Wangesha, a very important thing around how are we looking for alternative sources? Because obviously, as you said, the boat has sailed. Those avenues, they've dried up, they've been declared, we know. And even as we go around looking for this money, it's just not there. So how do we start tapping into, recent developments, like the Gen Z movement that you referenced, but also how do we collectively do it? Because I think at the moment it is very, not selective, but very siloed. An individual organization, an individual movement. But how do we start changing the face of African philanthropy? Because people do give. So how do we get them? How do we make ourselves relevant enough that, our people are funding our own causes? And on that note, I would like to call in Lillian to give us the final bit as we close off this conversation. Thank you so much, everyone. This has been such a rich conversation. Lillian, I hope you have heard the calls to have this on a more regular basis. You've heard the calls to have specialized collaborative efforts cross-border, across the region, pushing for specific issues like torture, abductions, and so forth and so on. And many of the other recommendations that have been made here today. Over to you, Lillian, and thank you so much, everyone, for your kind attention and for staying through the end and listening to our fantastic panelists. Please use your emojis to give our panelists a round of applause because they were quite incredible. Thank you so much. Back to you, Lillian.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Maureen. And thank you for taking us through this. I agree. This was quite resourceful. It was really needed. And the timing is also just perfect. And thanks to the panelists also for sharing the insightful thoughts. And I think this has just been very, 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 very fruitful. I'm glad and I'm happy that we are using the space to try and come up with solutions and try and share a number of ideas. And so thanks to the panelists. And before I even give a brief recommendations review, I totally agree. We should carry on this conversation. And just to also respond to Mr. Lema, I'm not so sure about the 2 weeks timeline. Maybe we can do it monthly. But also just to remind the participants we're having today, that is, we are also expecting to have our Civil Society Summit in September in Nairobi, and we are hoping to also carry on this conversation during the summit. So I welcome members and all the participants, and this is not only for EACSOF members, this is an open forum event for all civil society organizations that is within the East Africa region and also continental. You're welcome to participate, to hold meaningful conversations, that is, hold panel discussions. And I think that will also be a space for us to see how we synergize some of these efforts and network moving forward advocacy efforts. So with the recommendations, I'm not going to go through all of them. Our panelists have shared quite a number of recommendations, but just to strengthen on a few. The first is around strengthening the civil society coalitions across borders. I think I totally agree with you. The recommendation also came from Madam Mongeshi. That is, I think it's important to see how we leverage on the existing networks, and especially across the borders, seeing that the partner states are also, doing the same practices that have been happening in the neighbor partner states. I think it's important as civil society to see how we strengthen our voices. I like the idea of the amendment of the treaty. That's another recommendation. And we have been keenly following with the EAC and also trying to see as civil society how we begin this conversation. So probably the next time we actually meeting and discussing this can be one of the cornerstone conversations we are going to be holding, that is around the amendment of the East African Community Treaty and ensuring that the civil society voices are also included in that. And that also comes from the comment that was given from the colleague from DRC. Thanks for your insightful thoughts, and I've taken that into recommendations to see how better we actually echo the voice of the civil society and the people of DRC. And then another comment that came out very strongly was around the collaborative network. The use of EACSOF to carry on the collaboration across the region. I totally agree with you. I think we also need to see how we strengthen EACSOF moving forward and see how best we leverage this network to come up with tangible solutions. And I like also the recommendation. I'm not saying that I'm not going to read the ones I don't like, but I genuinely support the recommendation of collecting data, that is recording. This came from the chair, saying that we need to start documenting. And I think this is similar to what Madam Wangeshi said around developing a civil society index. I think this is important. That is a civic space index. I think it's important to begin collecting information. One of the strong, I'd say, tools of advocacy is when you have evidence, when you have information. And I think it's important as civil society to begin documenting. And as EACSOF, we are taking that keenly and trying to see how we begin to collect data, inform research, even through policy briefs, to ensure that we have these recorded incidents for purpose of advocacy, for purpose of information sharing. So I'm taking that very strongly. And on the discussion around economy, and I totally agree with all the conversations we've had. Maureen, you've highlighted this very well. Currently, the challenge is the economy, and we really need to see how we go back to the drawing board to discuss and see how we find solution to this, because otherwise the civic actions, the civic efforts we are actually trying to do within our partner states and also at the regional level will not be able to suffice if we don't have stable economies. And finally, just to wrap up, is the question of what can be done that Mr. Lema had raised. I agree with the comment that came from Mr. Yassin, that is to continue maximize engagement with existing frameworks at all levels, that is regional, continental, and international, either through advocacy, lobby, or even strategic litigation. I totally agree with that. I think moving forward, we need to see how we leverage on already what is existing, to see how we make it more strong. And even if we're forming new networks, I think we should also see how we synergize efforts to ensure that we have achieved the advocacy initiatives of the civil society. Maureen, I see you're looking at me. I will not go through all the recommendations. We'll definitely have a follow-up email sharing all the recommendations that we discussed in this panel session. I thank you all for being here, and I'm very, very glad to have this conversation. And I hope we carry on this fruitful conversation throughout the year. Asanteni sana, and I wish you a wonderful afternoon. Maureen, over to you.
Thank you so much, Lillian, for that. Mine is just to say thank you. And Lillian will be in touch with additional, to schedule additional sessions where we can have such conversations. Lillian, I hope the next conversation is the one around funding. Maybe we can talk together about what we do as a region in terms of the funding situation. Maybe each of us in our own corners is struggling with finding resources, and we're doing it on a one-on-one basis, but maybe we can come together and collaborate and see if there's something we can do as a region on a broader basis. Awesome. So thank you, everybody, and bye-bye. Thanks for joining the conversation.
Sante. You can switch on your videos so that we say bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Also take a group photo. I think our comms is busy taking a group photo.
Yeah, please do one. Yeah.
I think it's important to have that one.
Yeah, please do one.
Group photo.
So I believe in like 5 seconds. So I'm counting from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Do we have a photo? Thank you, Sam. I think the photo has been captured, and thank you guys for being present. And please, let's ensure we carry on this conversation.
Let's do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Asanteni.
Recording stopped.
Bye.